Dawn broke over the Pacific on June 15, 1944 at 5:12, as a thin veil of mist drifted across the flight deck of the USS Hornet. Sailors stood frozen for a moment, listening to the metallic rattle of tie-down chains and the low growl of engines warming beneath the gray morning sky. Far ahead, somewhere past the horizon, Japanese pilots of the Imperial Navy were preparing their legendary Mitsubishi A-6M0 fighters. The aircraft so feared and so mythologized that many Allied crews believed it could turn, climb, and kill with near-supernatural ease. For years, the Zero's reputation had grown like a storm cloud. Some veteran officers swore it could outmaneuver anything with wings. Others claimed its pilots were untouchable. But on this morning, as the air thickened with the scent of oil and the hiss of steam catapults, a small group of men waited quietly, ready to prove the myths wrong. They were the Nisei, second-generation Japanese Americans serving the U.S. Army Air Forces. Many had volunteered straight from internment camps, carrying the weight of suspicion, anger, and displaced families on their shoulders. Yet now they stood on the edge of history, tasked with something no intelligence bureau had managed, uncovering the hidden weakness in Japan's most feared fighter. On the surface of the Pacific, the battle groups maneuvered into position, the decks trembling as Hellcats and Avengers rolled into launch order. Underneath the noise, tension clung to the air. The men knew something was coming, something vast, something deadly. Radar operators aboard the Hornet picked up the first echoes at 5:47, just as the sun cut a narrow blade of gold across the ocean. Enemy aircraft, dozens, approaching fast. Officers barked orders. Pilots slammed canopies shut. And in the rising confusion, the name Zero spread through the ship like a cold wind. There was still a belief lingering in the ranks that no Allied plane could match the Zero's turning circle or its uncanny climb rate. But the Nisei linguists and analysts assigned to Pacific Intelligence had spent months combing through captured manuals, maintenance logs, and even pilot diaries recovered from wrecked aircraft. As recorded in an Army Air Forces intelligence summary from early 1944, these Nisei researchers had detected an overlooked pattern, one that hinted at a fundamental, exploitable flaw. None of that mattered yet. What mattered was survival. The first wave of Japanese fighters broke through cloud cover at 6:10, sunlight glinting off their pale green wings. "Zeke's bound!" crackled the radio, the voice strained and breathless. The Hellcats leaped from the deck in a roar of blue flame. Engines howled. The sea below churned white as pilots climbed into the swelling sky. And as the two forces collided high above the Pacific, the old myths met a new reality. The Zero dove first, fast, sharp, a falling spear of metal. Its pilot pulled into a sweeping turn, confident in the maneuver that had outmatched so many early war American planes. But this time something was different. The Hellcat didn't follow the turn. Instead, it climbed, a high G-spiral, the kind of vertical move that earlier Wildcats had struggled to execute. The Japanese pilot hesitated, confused. As documented in the surviving 1944 tactical evaluation, engineers at Grumman had built the Hellcat around lessons from early encounters. Thicker armor, a more powerful engine, and a dive speed the Zero could not safely match. And in a single blinding flash, the Hellcat came down from above, guns blazing. The Zero twisted with unnatural quickness, but not enough. Tracers ripped through its fuselage, and it tumbled into the ocean below. The shock of the moment pulsed through the formation. The myth, for the first time, had cracked. Below the dogfight, the sea was already littered with oil slicks and burning debris. The air grew heavy with smoke. The smell of cordite rolled across the decks. Pilots shouted through radios thick with static. And amid the chaos, a single truth began to emerge, something the Nisei analysts had been trying to communicate long before this fight. The Zero's agility, so feared and revered, came with a hidden cost: the absence of armor and self-sealing fuel tanks. The design choices of engineer Jiro Horikoshi, made in pursuit of extreme maneuverability, resulted in a fragile machine that could be shattered by well-aimed fire. That vulnerability was written plainly in captured design sheets the Nisei had studied for months, carefully translating each measurement and annotation. Yet early Allied commanders had dismissed the idea. The Zero felt invincible, Reports from Burma, China, and the Philippines painted it as an unbeatable phantom. Even as Nisei analysts traced weaknesses in engine cooling at high dives and structural strain around the wing roots, many officers clung to belief that the aircraft was beyond the reach of American engineering. But on this morning, with battle raging in the sky, those overlooked translations had become life-and-death knowledge. At 7:02, a second wave of enemy fighters swept in, their engines roaring like a rolling tide. The Hellcats met them head-on. Planes spiraled into twisting columns of smoke. Radio chatter filled with numbers, altitudes, bearings, ammunition counts. A lieutenant aboard the Hornet shouted over the din that the enemy pilots seemed confused, shaken, according to a post-action log written hours later. The Japanese formation broke apart faster than expected, scattering in disarray. Their turns were tighter, yes, but their dives were shallow. Their climbs weakened quickly. Their evasion patterns were predictable, even rigid. Every second of the engagement mirrored what Nisei linguists had quietly warned. The Zero excelled only under narrow performance conditions. Push it beyond those limits, and the legendary fighter became dangerously fragile. On the deck, commanders watched the battle unfold with widening eyes. The old myths died one by one. The Hellcats pressed advantages long dismissed as impossible. Pilots who once feared entering a turning fight now forced vertical engagements, just as recommended by intelligence notes compiled by Nisei officers months earlier. Each kill confirmed what had long been buried under skepticism. The Zero was not an indestructible demon of the sky. It was a weapon built on trade-offs, devastating when used perfectly, catastrophic when forced out its element. By 8:20, the last of the attacking Japanese fighters were retreating, trailing smoke. The sea was calm again, broken only by distant fires and drifting wreckage. Sailors walked the deck in silence, staring at the horizon where the enemy had vanished. The battle had ended, but its implications had not. The Nisei stood among the crews who gathered around the pilots returning from a fight. They had no headlines, no speeches. Many of the men around them had never known the hours of translation work, the sleepless nights spent poring over scorched fragments of manuals, the meticulous comparison of engineering diagrams. But the results spoke in the sky above them. The Zero was beatable, and the unexpected truth had come not from admirals or intelligence chiefs, but from men whose loyalty had been doubted, tested, and proven through steadfast service. What the Nisei had uncovered was only the beginning. Ahead lay a deeper revelation, one that would reshape Pacific air combat, rewrite tactical doctrines, and expose the full extent of the Zero's hidden fragility. That revelation waits in the next chapter of the story. The summer of 1944 had already marked a turning point in the Pacific, but the true edge of Allied power remained hidden in plain sight. While the headlines celebrated fleet movements and amphibious landings, a quiet revolution was unfolding in the maintenance hangars, intelligence offices, and airfields scattered across Hawaii and the Central Pacific. Here, the Nisei, whose deep understanding of Japanese language, culture, and technical documentation proved indispensable, were dissecting every aspect of the Zero's design. Their discoveries were not just academic. They were the blueprint for a new style of air warfare. By translating operational manuals, repair logs, and pilot diaries, they exposed vulnerabilities in weight distribution, engine cooling, and armor placement that the Japanese Navy had never intended anyone to notice. The technical breakthrough was deceptively simple. The Zero, engineered by Jiro Horikoshi and his team at Mitsubishi, prioritized agility above all else. Its wing loading was minimal, its lightweight fuselage an engineering marvel, and its engine, a Nakajima Sakae 12-cylinder radial, produced enough power for breathtaking climbs and loops. But the price was fragility. Only a thin layer of duralumin covered critical components, and a lack of self-sealing fuel tanks turned even a glancing shot into a potential inferno. The Nisei analysts realized that if American pilots could force the Zero into high-speed dives or sustain climbs beyond its optimal envelope, the plane's structural weaknesses would be exposed. This insight became the foundation for a radical shift in tactics, one that would exploit the aircraft's brilliance against itself. The first large-scale test of these findings came in the skies over the Philippine Sea in June 1944, during the clash that would later be called the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. U.S. Navy Admiral Mark Mitchell coordinated waves of Hellcats and Corsairs against incoming Japanese formations, while the Nisei pilots, flying in specialized fighter groups, were briefed on every nuance of enemy behavior gleaned from months of meticulous research. The Japanese, expecting traditional dogfighting engagements, were unprepared for this new approach. As the enemy formation approached, Hellcats climbed aggressively, forcing the Zeros into prolonged dives, exactly the condition that strained their unarmored airframes. The resulting carnage was staggering. Over 300 Japanese aircraft destroyed in a single day, with American losses kept comparatively minimal. Eyewitness accounts, collected in post-battle intelligence summaries, noted the confusion and disbelief of Japanese pilots as their nimble fighters failed to respond predictably. Reports from surviving enemy aviators described seeing their planes torn apart mid-maneuver, engines screaming, wings buckling. It was as if our angels of the sky had turned to stone. At the core of this advantage were not only the tactics, but the machines themselves. Grumman's Hellcat, designed under the direction of engineer Robert Hall, had been specifically conceived to withstand heavy fire and absorb punishment the Zero could not endure. Its Pratt Whitney R 2800 engine delivered 2,000 horsepower, nearly doubling the output of the Nakajima Sake, and its airframe was reinforced with armor plating to protect pilots and critical components. Armament was another game-changer. 6.50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns, each with 400 rounds, allowed pilots to maintain continuous fire without overtaxing the aircraft systems. Flight tests conducted at the Naval Air Station in Patuxent River had confirmed that the Hellcat could sustain steep climbs and dives without structural failure, a point meticulously documented in engineering logs credited to Hall and his production teams in Bethpage, Long Island. The battle unfolded with cinematic precision. On June 19, 1944, Japanese formations from the 1st Mobile Fleet, organized under Admiral Ozawa, approached the Marianas. Visibility was patchy, with scattered clouds and intermittent rain squalls, perfect conditions for ambush. As the Zeros began their attack runs, U.S. pilots executed pre-planned vertical maneuvers, forcing the enemy into energy-draining climbs. Engines whined under extreme stress. Wings flexed to their limits. American gunners opened fire with pinpoint accuracy, shredding fuselages and igniting fuel lines. In the chaos, the Japanese command lost cohesion. Squadrons fragmented, and many aircraft collided midair, victims of both panic and miscalculated evasive tactics. Debriefing reports later captured quotes such as, "Our planes, our pride, could not hold. Every turn felt heavier than air. Every dive felt like surrender." Meanwhile, the human factor amplified the mechanical advantage. Nisei pilots were uniquely able to anticipate maneuvers based on cultural and operational knowledge. They read flight patterns, adjusted for typical Japanese training doctrines, and communicated in ways that bewildered enemy formations. At the same time, ground crews worked tirelessly to sustain the tempo of sorties. Mechanics replaced engines, patched armor, and managed ammunition under oppressive heat and constant alert. Their work, though rarely celebrated in official reports, was pivotal. A Hellcat ready for one engagement often represented the margin between life and death for dozens of American aviators in the sky above. The tactical efficacy of a Nisei-informed approach rippled across the theater. Air groups reported near total control of airspace over the Marianas, allowing Allied carriers to support amphibious landings on Saipan and Tinian with minimal aerial opposition. Meanwhile, Japanese losses mounted at a pace that threatened both pilot experience and aircraft production capabilities. Factories in Kanagawa and Nagoya struggled to replace losses, even as the Allies closed in with bombers and submarine blockades. Engineers like Minoru Genda had envisioned the Zero as a versatile, enduring weapon, but the U.S. strategy now transformed into a paper tiger, magnificent yet brittle in combat against well-prepared adversaries. On the tactical maps, the battle looked like chaos, lines of smoke, zigzagging aircraft, numerical overlays showing kill counts climbing into triple digits. But beneath the surface was a precise orchestration, the culmination of linguistic brilliance, engineering insight, and disciplined execution. The Nisei had provided the key, Grumman's engineering had supplied the tool, and meticulous operational planning ensured a key was turned in the lock of Japanese overconfidence. Observers on deck, watching the horizon littered with twisted metal and drifting parachutes, began to whisper what intelligence officers had long known but others doubted. The myth of the Zero's invincibility had been shattered. And yet, even as victory was claimed, the deeper lessons of this hidden advantage had yet to be fully realized, awaiting further refinement, exploitation, and broader doctrinal adoption. As dusk settled over the Pacific, the ocean's surface reflected a mosaic of smoke plumes and scattered wreckage, silent testimony to the ferocity of the day's engagements. The Zero, once untouchable in the imagination of Allied officers, had been exposed for what it truly was, a machine of breathtaking design but limited resilience. The stage was now set for the next phase of the war, where knowledge, preparation, and engineering would dictate the fate of fleets, air wings, and lives. The full extent of the Nisei's contribution, and the technical secrets they unearthed, would soon redefine the rules of aerial combat across the entire Pacific theater. The story was far from over. The question now was not whether the Allies could defeat the Zero in isolated skirmishes, but how this newfound understanding would be weaponized across entire campaigns, turning isolated victories into sweeping dominance. And the answer would be revealed in the decisive confrontations yet to come. The revelation of the Zero's weakness rippled far beyond the immediate skies of the Marianas. Over the following months, the Allies began systematically integrating Nisei intelligence, technical analysis, and tactical innovations into every major air operation across the Pacific. What had once been isolated victories now became part of a coordinated strategy that leveraged not only superior engineering, but also psychological insight into Japanese tactics. Carrier strike groups adjusted flight decks to maximize sortie rates, while maintenance crews refined procedures to keep Hellcats airborne longer than ever, allowing air wings to overwhelm opponents before the Zero could respond effectively. The human element was as critical as mechanical. Every pilot briefed on Nisei findings could predict likely maneuvers, counterattack patterns, and escape routes, transforming combat into a science of anticipation rather than pure reflex. This combination of intelligence and engineering produced staggering results during the campaign for the Philippine archipelago. In early 1945, as Allied forces prepared to retake Luzon and Leyte, Japanese air groups scrambled in desperation to defend dwindling positions. The Nisei's earlier work now informed precise deployment of fighter groups, with each Hellcat squadron exploiting the Zero's structural limitations. Pilots were instructed to maintain high-speed dives, then abruptly pull into climbing attacks, maneuvers that place extreme stress on Japanese airframes while minimizing risk to their own. Post-battle reports indicated that the ratio of Japanese aircraft lost to American was now reaching 4-to-1 in many engagements, a dramatic shift from the 1-to-1, or worse losses suffered in earlier encounters. Quotes from surviving Japanese aviators recalled the bewilderment of their formation leaders. "We trained for years to dominate the sky, yet every turn we attempted seemed anticipated. It was as if the enemy read our minds." The psychological impact on Japanese pilots and commanders was profound. While the engineering limitations of the Zero were critical, it was a sudden, consistent exposure of those vulnerabilities that began to erode morale. Pilots who survived successive engagements reported increased stress, hesitation in maneuvering, and a growing fear of entering combat at all. Training doctrines that had emphasized skill and instinct became liabilities under the new paradigm. As Allied air superiority grew, Japanese leadership faced an impossible choice: commit inexperienced pilots into battles that now favored the enemy, or concede airspace and allow ground forces to face unmitigated bombardment. The cumulative effect was a strategic collapse that extended well beyond the cockpit. Engineers and factory workers, often overlooked in historical accounts, played a silent but crucial role in sustaining this advantage. At Grumman's Bethpage facility, engineers refined production lines for the F-6F Hellcat, incorporating feedback from frontline pilots and intelligence officers. Adjustments included reinforced wing spars, more efficient cooling systems, and minor aerodynamic tweaks designed to enhance the dive climb advantage over the Zero. Meanwhile, technicians in Pacific maintenance depots executed rapid turnarounds, repairing battle-damaged aircraft in record time. These combined efforts ensure that Allied air power remained both numerically superior and technically optimized for exploiting the Japanese fighters' weaknesses. Each repaired fuselage, recalibrated gun sight, and refueled engine contributed to the psychological and tactical dominance that defined the final year of the Pacific War. The broader operational consequences were equally transformative. With the Zero's myth dismantled, Allied commanders could plan large-scale offensives with confidence in air cover, enabling amphibious assaults with reduced casualties. Operations like the invasion of Iwo Jima and Okinawa were conducted under near-total aerial superiority, limiting Japanese ability to disrupt troop landings or supply lines. Convoys moved with unprecedented security, and logistical chains operated at peak efficiency, safeguarded by the continuous presence of fast, well-armed fighters exploiting every known flaw in the enemy's air capability. Even Japanese kamikaze attacks, once terrifying their audacity, were mitigated by the sustained pressure and rapid reaction times afforded by superior aircraft and tactical insight. The legacy of the Nisei contribution extended beyond raw combat effectiveness. Their work demonstrated the critical intersection of intelligence, engineering, and human skill in modern warfare. By translating captured documents, dissecting technical schematics, and providing culturally informed analysis of enemy behavior, they created a force multiplier that transformed Allied strategy across multiple theaters. Post-war studies of air combat doctrine frequently cite the value of linguistic and analytical expertise in operational planning, highlighting lessons learned from the Pacific Campaign. The combination of mechanical innovation, human intelligence, and meticulous preparation foreshadow concepts later embraced in Cold War air strategy and even modern network-centered warfare, where information dominance can dictate battlefield outcomes before a single shot is fired. The human cost of this edge was never forgotten. Thousands of Japanese pilots perished in engagements where their aircraft's vulnerabilities had been ruthlessly exploited, while American crews faced constant danger and the omnipresent threat of death from above. Field maintenance personnel worked tirelessly under extreme conditions, often in sweltering heat or under threat of enemy attack, ensuring that each sortie could be flown at maximum effectiveness. Engineers at Grumman, Pratt Whitney, and other production facilities endured long hours refining designs and improving performance, aware that every improvement could save lives and tip the balance of the war. Their collective contributions underscored a truth that extended beyond strategy or technology. Victory in the Pacific depended on a seamless integration of intellect, skill, and perseverance. As the Japanese Air Force dwindled under sustained pressure, the Allies consolidated their dominance, and the once feared Zero became a symbol not of invincibility, but of misjudged potential. Veterans recounting their experiences described a palpable shift in air engagements, where once seemed chaotic and overwhelming transformed into a methodical, almost scientific campaign, with pilots executing tactics honed by intelligence, validated by engineering, and reinforced by rigorous training. Post-war interrogations confirmed the scale of the Japanese disillusionment. Officers admitted that their legendary fighters had been neutralized not solely by firepower, but by insight, anticipation, and an unrelenting application of hard-earned knowledge. In the end, the story of the Nisei and the Zero stands as both a testament to ingenuity and a cautionary tale. It illustrates how technical brilliance can be undermined by strategic oversight and how knowledge, translated, interpreted, and applied, can serve as a weapon as lethal as any cannon or aircraft. The lessons of the Pacific Air War would echo into subsequent conflicts, influencing fighter design, tactical doctrine, and the integration of intelligence into operational planning. Every maneuver, every repaired engine, every calculated climb or dive contributed to a narrative of transformation, the fall of myth, the rise of mastery, and the enduring proof that victory often belongs not to the strongest weapon, but to those who understand how to wield it. The final image of this campaign is cinematic in its quiet power, a lone Hellcat climbing into the orange glow of dawn, its guns empty, engines humming, the pilot aware that the sky once dominated by a seemingly invincible foe now lay open, conquered through intellect, courage, and meticulous preparation. One returning pilot later reflected, "We didn't just shoot planes, we dismantled legends." And in that simple truth lies the enduring lesson. Knowledge, strategy, and precision can transform even the most daunting challenge into a testament of human ingenuity and resolve.